I've been asked multiple times about who, what, where, why, how. So I'm going to briefly reminisce about my time as editor-in-chief of the Arab News. Stick around and enjoy. The last time we met, I spoke about some of the humorous incidents that happened pre-going into Kuwait and in Kuwait, and talked about the Oriana Fallaci incident. But right now I'm going to focus on some of the things that happened as we were about to exit Kuwait. We decided that Kuwait's story was no more because all the journalists from around the globe had arrived. The Allied troops had entered Kuwait. The Iraqis were in disarray. We made a day trip to Basra and then came back and decided to fold up, and we went back. On the way, as we were coming, there were no borders, but while going back, you had police and army checkpoints, and we were stopped at one of the checkpoints, and much to our horror, they insisted to open the trunk of the car, which was full of ammunition and 4 Kalashnikovs. And the man looked inside, came on the side, called his officer, and the officer looked at me and then said, "What's this?" I said, "These are war trophies." He said, "You're not supposed to take arms and ammunition." I said, "These are just mementos." Then another officer came and said, "Okay, we're going to let you go because into Sinan." Sinan in Arabic was CNN. He thought we were CNN, so they took all the arms and everything. I just asked them that I keep 4 or 5 bullets just for memory's sake, which they allowed. They allowed Wahib Ghurab to have a couple of bullets, so we ended up with 7 or 8 bullets. We had brought about 300 bullets with us. Anyway, that was one of the incidents. And then we came back. On the way back, we met a lot of people who had by now known that the Arab News team was in Kuwait. People were very warm, friendly. Some of the businessmen in the eastern province had a dinner for us. They asked us about the incidents in Kuwait, what was happening, some of the stories. Many of them were exaggerated stories, but on the whole, I think they had a first glance through our way of telling them about what happened in Kuwait. In the meantime, that famous car or van that Saeed Haider was driving, which was given by the late Prince Fahd bin Salman, the deputy governor of the Eastern Province, we decided to keep it with us. And we kept it for a few days, a few weeks. And one day, and it was one of the few cars that had a phone, you had these car phones, a call came, a stern voice, asking who was driving the car, and Saeed Haider panicked and said, "I'm driving." And we were told that the war had ended, our mission had ended, and please return the van back to the palace. So we made Saeed Haider the scapegoat, and he took it back. But this again speaks much about the generosity of the late Prince Fahd bin Salman, who was a great supporter to us during the 8.5 months we were there. We would go to his house, have a meal down there, and talk, take advice, and be with him. One day I was sitting in his office, and I saw some fancy-looking gas masks, and I said, "What are these?" He said, "These gas masks have been given to us to have, if God forbid there's a Scud attack with all kinds of germ warfare or chemical warfare." And I said, "Yes, Prince, you are having a quality type of gas mask. But what about us folks? They're giving us 1916 vintage gas masks." He said, don't believe it." So we sat in his car, myself and Wahib Ghurab and Muhammad Samman, and went to where they were distributing the gas masks. And this was pre-going into Kuwait. And then he sat and asked the guy, "What is this?" The man said, "We only give gas masks if people come with an igama, or they have a Saudi ID card, which in those days was a large plastic one." So the prince got upset. He said, "Sorry, anybody who comes, take his name and give him a gas mask. He doesn't have to get a letter from the kafil, because by the time the guy goes to get a letter from the kafil and there's a Scud attack or a chemical attack, everyone will be dead, both the kafil and the worker." So this was the kind of person that the prince was. And I mention this because in history you have to mention about things that happened and which affected you. And it truly affected me. Prince Fahd bin Salman always loved to drive in the evening to go and check places and see how people were doing. And once while we were driving, we stopped at a gas station. He got out of the car, and so did Wahib Ghurab, who was sitting with us. We went out and he asked the gas attendant, "Why are you here?" The gas attendant was a Pakistani, and then I had the honor of translating in Urdu, and he asked him again, "Why didn't you not leave and go back to your country?" Because many of the expatriates and the foreigners decided to leave. And the Pakistani gentleman told the prince, he told him that this is Mecca and Medina, this is my land, and I'm going to die here and face any attack on Saudi Arabia. Prince Fahd was very visibly moved by this, and he literally hugged the man and thanked him. Such was the type of people who I met and which benefited me all along while I was there, to see what I might call the vision, the principles, the dedication they had to their job. Truly, I always remember him, and even years later, when we used to meet in Riyadh, we would talk about and discuss, and what this humble man had to say truly affected me. Another point was, we had gone once to a camp for workers in Jubail, and the prince got out of his car and we went to the canteen. And of course, when they see the deputy governor coming in, and there was no big entourage. Of course, we had a couple of police cars, there were some guards, and then the prince went and sat and then took a plate and stood in line with the workers as they went to get their meal. So again, I would say to those people in positions today, bureaucrats and young people in businesses, take an example of the humility of this man who would do things for the sake of Allah and not just to have a glory. He never asked that anything be written about him in Arab news or any other paper. These were some of the things that we encountered. I also met a large number of Saudi businessmen, and honestly, the outpour of love, respect, and the hospitality to the Arab news was great. We also met a large number of Saudi businessmen and established good relations with them, became friends, and even until today, we are in touch with each other. One of them would send food packets, lunch and dinner to the Arab news office. For them, the Arab news was a matter of pride. It was not a newspaper, it was a Saudi institution. And I can name all of them, but the list will go on and on. They would send food for us, they would ask about us, they would care about us, they would invite us to their homes because we were there. And I think thanks should go to Allah, and then to the publishers who took that gamble, and Prince Ahmed bin Salman also, the chairman of the SRMG group. And I'm mentioning these names not just for the sake of mentioning, but history should record that there were those people in the media houses who knew what media was. And as the troops started filtering out of Saudi Arabia, we began packing our bags to come back to Jeddah. Our stories became more human interest stories. And we were still in the limelight because the major networks were there. And I was sitting in the hotel when the CNN asked me for the 50th time to go and talk about what is going to happen in future. And I was sitting, and suddenly a gentleman called Mr. Nabil Murad of the Ministry of Information ran from the second floor to the 6th floor where I was being filmed, opened the door and ran past by me. So I think he wanted to have a glimpse to be seen in the CNN. Years later, he said that I knew you were being filmed, and I just went and walked past by you, and we couldn't stop it because this was a live broadcast. So these kind of incidents happened. Many friendships were made, as I said before, and I think as every good thing has to end, war is not a good thing. But then again, that adventure slowly began to fizzle out. We began to see the reality, and we said back again to normal, and back again to the grinder, back again to the dusk, and we packed our bags, and on April the 4th, almost 8 months after our first visit to Dammam and Khubar, after the 2nd of August, and only one trip back to see my family, I came home. And to a great and rousing welcome from the Arab News, from the publishers, and above all, from my family. While the Kuwait operations was over, the troops began to go home. We rounded up our operations and headed back to Jeddah. But by no means was my journey over with Arab News. I'll talk about these steps in my next episode. Please like, subscribe, and share the videos, and leave a comment if you can.